You're free to begin.
Thank you. This call the meeting to order. Need a motion to adopt the minutes of the county council regular meeting dated 25th of January, 2023. Councillor Richardson and Councillor Fritsch, are there any errors or omissions? If not, all in favor? And that's carried. Adoption of the regular meeting held February the 8th, 2023. A mover and a seconder. Councillor Davison, seconded by Councillor Hagedorn. Are there any errors or omissions in those? And if not, all those in favor? And that's carried. Approval of the agenda. A mover and a seconder. Councillor Fritsch, seconded by Councillor Calver. All in favor? That's carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. None noted. Matters for consideration. Number one, we have the 2023 assessment and tax policy. I'll turn this over to Mr. Day.
Through you, Mr. Warden, if it's okay, I'd like to share my screen. I have a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation on the assessment and tax policy report that's in your agenda.
Go ahead.
Can council see my screen, the presentation, the PowerPoint?
That's good.
Okay. Well, before tonight and for the members of the public and new members to county council, I just wanted to review tax policy, the assessment and tax ratio requirements, or what's the responsibilities of the county. So basically, just an overview. Obviously, taxation is impacted by the county municipal and education levy requirements. That's obviously what we need to generate through taxation to operate our organizations. It's also affected by property assessment and by tax policies. And who's responsible for what is obviously the county taxes are set by the county. Municipal taxes are set by the local municipality within the county. Education taxes that are on the property tax bill are set by the province. Impact does the assessment throughout the province, and the tax policies are set by the county, but it's heavily influenced by provincial guidelines, and we're in strict guidelines on what exactly we can do. So tonight we'll go through that. Excuse me. The assessment is based on current value as of 2016 January 1. Normally, the province had been going through a reassessment every 4 years. 2016 was the last one. Normally, when there was a new reassessment, any increases were phased in over 4 years equally. So 25% a year. If you had an increase, it was phased in. Any decreases that happened in a reassessment year happened that first year right away. So if someone got a decrease in their assessment, in January 2017, it was reflected in 2017. 2020 was the 4th year of that phase in. Since COVID, since then, there has been no reassessment. So for 2023, again, there's been no reassessment, and the assessment values, as mentioned before, the council is based same as 2020, unless there was changes to the properties, either adjustments, or additions or deletions, and any reassessments in that regard, or new builds. So the total county assessment is at 6.15 billion. The residential makes up 80.15% of that total. Just for reference, Addington Highlands is at 9.3%. Loyalist and Greater Napanee are actually the same. This is before the weighted, before the ratios, at 36.8, and Stone Mills is at 17.1. This slide is this table really just kind of illustrates based on that total assessment. You can see the 80.15 for residential, and then this is an example of the levy that was presented to council at the last meeting of the 34,067,000. Because of the ratios, you can see that residential is roughly the same. Assessments at 80.15% of the total, but the percentage of the levy is 81.4%. If you look at commercial, it's at The assessment is represents 4.51% of the total, but the taxation of the levy is 6.5%. And that is regard to the ratio that's on the commercial property. Same thing if you look at large industrial and industrial. Industrial is at 0.75% of the total assessed value, but at 1.66% of the total levy. Large industrial is at 1.43% of the total assessment, but represents almost 4% of the tax levy. And if you look at farm, represents 5.5% of our assessment, because they do get the farm reduction, it's 0.25% of the residential, that it represents roughly 1.4% of the total tax levy. And obviously exempt properties generate no tax dollars. So the tax rate calculation is our county levy. It's the amount of taxation we need to generate it, divided by the weighted property assessment. And the weighted property assessment is that assessment times the tax ratio. That it gets our residential tax rate. So then to get the property taxes for that is someone's property assessment times that tax rate equals how much they pay for the year. This slide just illustrates that if there's an assessment increase equally among all different classes that have the same ratio, obviously that the pie, their share stays the same. So if we went from a total assessment for those property classes, an example of 400,000 up to 500,000, that 25% increase is shared evenly amongst the different properties. Shifting assessments. This is when you see when there is a reassessment in some of the properties that the shares can change between the classes. So again, it's a total of 500,000 assessment, but if it shifts, example, if more goes to residential, they'll be paying more. Conversely, if industrial goes down to 10%, they'll be paying less with that. So what the tax ratio does, it expresses the relationship that the tax rate in for each property class bears to the tax rate in the residential class. It impacts the municipal portion and the county portion. It does not affect the education tax rates as they are set by the province. And it doesn't change the total dollars that we need to operate. It just on who pays. It does the shifts between those different classes. So if you look here with the ratios, all 1%, their shares again 25%. We have different ratios, which we do have for the different property classes. You can see how the pie shapes or their shares differentiate. So in your agenda on page 17, there's a little bit of a background for the tax ratios that if we were to switch, go to the provincial recommendation that was years ago, back in 98, when this was first fair market value assessment was implemented, recommending 1-to-1 for multi-residential, commercial, industrial, and pipeline classes. If we were to do that today, move those ratios to 1-to-1, that would result in a 7.9% increase in the residential tax rate alone, not even any levy requirements. That would just it would hit the residential taxpayer by 7.9%. Here's our current ratios that are in place and that we have for moving forward for 2023. Excuse me. I did do a survey with Eastern Ontario's from their websites, and the summaries actually in your agenda. So here's the Eastern Ontario's average, and then what our current ratio is. Here's just a summary of that's in your report, what tax ratio changes we have done in the past. So as you can see, in 2001, we reduced the multi-residential and the average industrial ratios. 2002, again, the multi-residential in 2005, and in 2007, we did some industrial and large industrial changes. 2017, we did reduce the multi-res to 2.0. Council should be aware that there's also a class called new multi-res. So any new multi-res properties are limited to the same as residential. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. There's not an increase, and that's to entice new multi-residential builds. So these are just on the old multi-resident properties that have 7 or more units as classified as multi-residential. Back in 2017, which would have reflected that last phase in of assessment, there was a large increase in the farm category, and council at that time did reduce the farm tax ratio to 0.23. And it slowly increased back up to 0.25 over the next 3 years. That was to help offset the large change in reassessed value at that time. The reassessment before, for council members that might remember, there was a large increase in reassessment for waterfront properties, were a class that were hit very, very high with the reassessment. It's really too early to predict what the new reassessment, what classes will be hit. That's why I'm not really recommending any changes to the tax ratios because they haven't had a reassessment. So we'll just be shifting on who pays the amount, and it usually would go towards the residential ratepayer. 2019, we did have reductions for vacant unit and vacant excess land in the commercial class. We did do away with that reduction, but in 2019, we also allowed for a 75% reduction for commercial and industrial small scale farm operations that were on farms. This table just gives an example of 2022 taxes based on 100,000 assessment, just a breakdown between the county, municipal and education tax rates. You can see percentage on 100,000 what the tax bill is. Just for reference, the county's portion ranges from roughly 27% to 38% of the total tax bill, with the municipal and the education making up the other portions. The major difference is the education. You can see that education tax rates that are set by the province for the commercial and industrial classes are about 5.75 times more than what residentials pay based on 100,000 of assessment. And this comparison is just based on the Loyalist general rate for 2022. So in the report, there's other tax policies, and these have been classified for the optional classes: relief from hardship, the rebate for charitable organizations, low income for seniors, heritage properties. Again, I did mention though that the vacant unit rebate and excess land has been eliminated. And there was a new small business property subclass that was offered in 2021, which there has been no interest from the lower tiers. Some heavy discussions on not very many municipalities have taken advantage of this. It's a very burdensome on the lower tier or the municipalities that have to generate this. They have to determine what classifies as a small business and have a criteria and open house. And there has been to date no real interest in adopting those subclasses. So basically, the report there is in front of you as well, looking for some direction from council if they want to make changes. I have recommended talk with the lower tier treasurers, and with not being a reassessment year and there's been no changes, that we aren't really recommending any changes at all this time to tax ratios or tax policies that are offered. But I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have, and I'll stop sharing the screen so that everyone can see each other.
Does anyone have questions of Mr. Day? If not, I need a motion to receive the report and adopt his recommendation of no change. Councillor Fretch, Councillor Hagedorn, any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Now, reserves and reserve funds. Once again, Mr. Day.
Mr. Warden, obviously, the report presented to council is to the purpose of the report is to provide a summary of really the current financial position and to allocate the 2021 surplus funds to the county's reserves and reserve funds. If I can share my screen, I'll just put up what's on page 29 of your agenda, or if you do not want me to put that up, if everyone has that in front of them, whatever you would like, Mr. Ward, if you want me to put it on the screen.
Go ahead.
Okay. So as this was presented when we did do the review with the KPMG on our audited financial statements from 2021, the overall surplus was $3,077,000. This did represent what they saw with the comparable municipal clients at their size, representing about 3.7% of our total budget of 2021 of 83.5 million. This does break it down by department. Just wanted to mention that in prior years and in this year's budget as well, we've had 360,000 of the prior year surplus has been allocated to fund the roads and bridges capital projects. The library reserve there of $151,020 per our policy must be allocated to the library reserve, since Arlington Highlands does not participate in the library levy, so that all needs to go into that library reserve. It's recommended that the social housing asset management plan, that the housing surpluses of $186,145 be used to fund future social housing projects. Also making the recommendation of the surpluses for social services of $18,411 and children's services of $95,684 be allocated to their department reserves. This will help assist future funding requirements because of the possible future funding provincial changes that might occur that we're unaware of. Also, it's recommended that 1.5 million of the surplus be allocated to the John M. Parrott Center and 300,000 for the paramedic services for future provincial reconciliation, because there is a time delay when they do get our annual returns and when they do the reconciliation, sometimes 2 or 3 years before they get back to us if we do have to pay anything funding back. So if we do that, a report would come back to council saying this is where it's going to be funded from, is from that reserve. So that leaves an unallocated amount of $465,769. And it recommended that property services receives $336,076, and the technological equipment or general reserve $129,693. And this will help fund future capital projects in those areas that are being really hit by some price increases that we do have. So on the next slide is the summary of the reserves at the end of 2021. The next column shows the breakdown that I just went through verbally with the allocation of that $3,077,000. And in the 2022 estimated adjustments that we have, obviously it's subject to, we're going through year end now. So the ending balances could change, but that will be presented to council when we do have our financial statements presented with KPMG and the year end has been closed and all adjustments have been in. So also in the report, and hopefully you've had a chance to read it, is a breakdown of what our reserves are and what they're used for. There's a description in each one of those. So what I'm really looking forward for tonight is hopefully a council approves staff recommendation to allocate this prior year surplus to those reserves. I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Does anyone have questions of Mr. Day? If not, I need a motion to receive the report and adopt those recommendations. Councillor Richardson, second by Councillor Davidson. Any further questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, award of tenders. Mr. Wager.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you, this first report, the transverse pavement markings is in partnership with the longitudinal pavement markings, but they were awarded as a separate contract just so we can increase the number of bidders for our line painting. This came in on budget. We typically have about $30,000 that we're planning for 2023, and we're coming in just below that at about $28,500. The low bidder is Online Pavement Marking, which is actually a local company. It's nice to see them bid. They are capable of performing the work, and staff's recommending award of that contract, and I'll be happy to answer any questions should council have any.
Does anyone have questions of Mr. Wager on this report? If not, I need a motion to receive it and adopt the recommendation. Councillor Richardson, Councillor Townend, any further questions? All in favor? That's carried. Now we got a second report on the longitudinal. Mr. Wager.
Yes. Through you, Mr. Warden. This is the one that had more of a significant increase. It's actually about 20% above our estimated, 20% above what we paid last year in line painting. I was carrying 280,000 total, which is 250 was allocated for the longitudinal. And unfortunately, it came in a bit higher at 285,000. So in discussions with Mark Day, he's adjusted the operational cost, which is in a following report after this one. But staff's recommending award of the contract to the low bid, and I'll be happy to answer any questions should council have any.
Does anyone have questions of Mr. Wager? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Warden. I'm just interested in the fact that is McGuinness a local company, and I see that they've come in, well, I'll suggest substantially lower, but quite a bit lower than most, other than maybe Trillium. They're $20,000 less. Are they a local company? And I'm just wondering, without getting into any details, it just seems to be a little bit off compared to what the other ones are, and maybe thank goodness, because we'd really have to adjust our budgets if they weren't, I guess. So
unfortunately, there's not really a good local company. Well, there is a good local company that can do it, but McGuinness is a good company, and they're out of Port Perry, so they're not considered local. Basically, what you see there, as far as the 7 bidders or the 6 bidders, sorry. That's really all there is in Ontario that I'm aware of for line painting, basically from Toronto to Montreal and up to Ottawa. So it was very fortunate to get that many bids. Normally we see 2, maybe 3 if we're lucky. Historically, like our line painting last year was 24 cents a meter. And the low bid on this one, as I said, was 20% higher than that. It came in at 29. So I'm not concerned with the low bid. I think it's just more of a timing issue or maybe even a product issue, that they have the product that we're speccing and surplus of it, and that's why they're coming down here to do our work.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you, Chris.
Any other questions? If not, I need a motion to receive that report and adjust the budget accordingly. Councillor Fritsch, Councillor Calver, any further questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. Budget update. Mr. Day.
Through you, Mr. Warden. Yes, apologize to council for the late resubmission of this report, but we felt it very important that we have the latest updated amounts for council's consideration. As Mr. Wager did say, we had a discussion on what that increase came in on the tender on Friday, if it was even possible to absorb that in operations for this year, but it was unrealistic to try and have him shave a tight budget to kind of predict if we could cut another 55,000 in operations when there's still a lot left in the year, obviously, and kind of hard to predict. So that being said, staff did go back per council's direction from the last meeting to look at different options to reduce the levy between the 4.5 to 4.9%. With this $55,000 adjustment, unfortunately, we were only able to come in between the 4.7 and the 4.9%. If you, through you, Mr. Warden, if I could share my screen, I do have the summary
Go ahead.
on there, so you can all see it. Can you all see that? Okay. Okay. So how does that reflect, and what are the options that staff are presenting for council's consideration to make a levy adjustment for the 2023? Above the blue line, obviously the 1,643,178 was where we're at from the last meeting. The line painting tender adjustment of 55,000 brings it to 1,698,178, or 5.4% levy increase. So what options that we're proposing to look at, the item numbers refer to from the last council and from the January meetings that we discussed, the IT staffing enhancement. If we look at implementing that July 1st, we're able to not reduce the levy requirement by $56,500. It's recommended if we do the staffing market review of $30,000. It's a one-time thing. We're recommending that come from our general reserve as a one-time funding. It's not an ongoing expense that we have year to year that we'd have to make up for next year by using it for reserves for the operations. The JPMC nursing practitioner model, we're looking at, and we're quite confident that we could, that increase in cost of the $36,250 that was presented in the last meeting, if we were to share her services, or their services, I should say, to some other long-term care homes in the area, of billing out 1 to 2 days to make up that difference of the $36,250, we're quite confident that we'd be able to recoup that. So it would be a net zero cost to the county for that. Another option for council's consideration is if we reduce the economic development activation from 40,000 down to 20,000, that obviously would save 20,000 off the levy. And that's just a reduction that we've looked at going through the budget. Another option that we've considered is to sell a surplus ambulance, estimated proceeds of 12,000. Original plan was to retain 3 of the ambulances. So if we can maybe keep 2, and one is to keep as for parts, and one is a spare, and it'd be housed at the stone mill. So we would save 14,200 in fuel and oil and maintenance, plus the 12,000 in estimated selling value for 26,200. The other item we're looking at is actually a change in an accounting treatment for the tree trimming and from the removal from the ditches and the side of the roads. That has been historically recorded in our operating budget. Mr. Wager and myself did have the conversation that he does strongly believe that it does increase the length, or sorry, the life of the road work network if those trees and that are removed. And that is a requirement to have something as capital. If we can show that it does increase the useful life of an asset, then it can be classified as a capital asset or a betterment to that asset. So we had 50,000 earmarked for that in the operating budget. We're proposing to move that to the capital budget. It won't affect the levy. It will affect the transfer from reserves that they're financing that portion of that capital work. So that being said, the total of all the options is 218,950 reduction. So it can it's up for council's consideration if they want to do any of those options to help reduce the overall levy to get into a range that council feels comfortable at. And I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Does anyone have questions or points they make to wish to make? Councillor Fritsch.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. I had a comment. One was regarding the Economic Development Activation Fund, reducing it. And that one I struggle with, because if there's anything we want to encourage in our municipality is some innovation, some creativity, and projects that could result in some, I'm going to say, long-term improvement with some businesses and activities that go on across our county. So I'm not in favor of cutting that one in particular. I had a question, though, I guess, regarding the IT staffing enhancements and just changing the implementation date. And really, a question is, does that have much of a negative impact, or does it on? I know it's a later start, but is it making the operation of the IT department difficult by shoving that downstream another 4 or 5 months?
Through you, Mr. Warden, Jason and I will arm wrestle for who's going to go first here, but in all likelihood, it would take us until July to onboard somebody anyway. By the time you review your budget now, it gets approved really at the next meeting. So that takes us into March. Advertise the position in April. do interviews in May. They have to give notice, onboard them in July. So it really, I think it would be the natural progression of what the impact would be. Now, mind you, then next year on the budget, you'll see the full 100% of that position, but really, it's going to take us that long anyway to fill that position.
Okay, thank you.
Jason might want to add to what I said.
No, that summarizes exactly. Again, this is a net new for us. We are managing at this time with our current staff complement, but we do identify this as a need. And we're at, I guess, the mercy of council as far as just approval and moving forward on that.
Mr. Wise, you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Warden. And my apologies for the delay in joining tonight. Excuse me. As far as sharing the nurse practitioner goes, Mark, has Angela or anyone reached out to other facilities to see if that in fact would be something that could happen?
I believe Malcolm is on to answer that, and I believe she has.
Yes, through you, Mr. Warden, I have reached out to a couple of homes, and I have had a positive response from one home, and one that is not interested right now, but I'm waiting on another response from another home. So so it is possible. I think it's very reasonable, and it's a good partnership to have, especially with a smaller home who wouldn't perhaps have the work for a 5-day-a-week nurse practitioner.
And a follow-up, if I may, then,
Go ahead.
Warden. But this takes away from something you really want at the Parrott Center, Angela. Is this a significant sacrifice on your part, given the staff shortages that you've been putting up with? Again,
through you, Mr. Warden. So remembering that we don't have this now, so we would be having it 3 days a week. And so, I mean, anything is going to be a benefit. Do I think that we could use them 5 days a week? Yes. But I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to help and certainly willing to accept whatever you're willing to give us, I guess.
Okay, I do have some reservations given the staffing situation that you're putting up with. Maybe 1 day a week or something like that would be better. We've got a few balls in the air here we're going to have to decide on. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Warden.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Hagedorn.
Thank you. Through you, Warden. I'll start at the bottom of the chart. The tree trimming and removal from the county roads. I guess this is a work that I envision being more of a maintenance style, but moving it from one item to the other may not be a big concern. But I wanted to confirm, in my history, typically something being under capital meant that it was locked in and was handled a lot of times by outside sources. By changing it to capital, will this in any way impair the county's work to be flexible, especially with the way the mortality rate for the trees have been over the last number of years?
Through you, Mr. Warden. Oh, and I see Mr. Wager's on. I believe not. It's just on really how we're recording it. The operation and how we do it should not change. Mr. Wager maybe have some more insight, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Our contract with our local municipalities is they have first right of refusal to do any of the maintenance work, and it is maintenance work, and historically under the operation works. But should they not want to do it or can't do it, depending on the size of the tree or their own schedules, then that work will be contracted out to local contractors. So it could be a mixture of both, depending on schedule. Secondly, the moving it to a capital item, there is an argument that it does, dry up the road easier. It reduces shading and improves drainage, which does, increase the lifespan of the road. So it can be justified on the capital GLs.
Thank you. You touched on a couple of things. I was thinking the shading and the drainage and everything could be certainly capital, viewed as capital trimming and things I was struggling with a little bit. So thank you. If I may, Warden, I've got another couple other
Go ahead.
questions here. The one just above it, surplus ambulances. I'm just, the last, well, year, 2 years that we've had, both in this field, and a lot of them between ordering and purchasing vehicles, that has been a challenge for the last few years, couple years especially. And I know locally we're struggling and ordering years in advance too to try and actually acquire vehicles. So I'm concerned if we let an extra ambulance go and we don't end up with a new vehicle, that we might end up reducing services. And the other thing is in the past, offloading was a real concern and tied up vehicles for extended periods of time with, it was completely out of our control. So on those two, I'm just concerned with getting rid of the extra ambulance. And then if we run into those situations again, would it impact the level of service that we would be able to provide to the residents?
I see, through you, Mr. Warden, I see that Ms. Hendry is on.
Go ahead.
To respond to that.
Through you, Mr. Warden, you are absolutely correct, Councillor Hagedorn. It was just, there's absolutely nothing else that we can cut from our budget. We're very lean, but to add the same as Angela, we're trying to be part, and we have another surplus ambulance. So at the very least, we would be willing to give up one of them. We still have one in reserve for those incidents because it's still in fairly good shape. That's why we get a half decent price for them when they go to Gov Deals. That if we hit a deer tomorrow, we could actually remove the equipment from the ambulance that's been in the collision and move that into, put that one in service to get us through that period. But you're absolutely correct. It's been very, very difficult to get parts and vehicles. So there is that concern.
Thank you.
Any other?
Yep.
Councillor Calver.
Okay, through your Warden. Yeah, I'm myself, I'm against getting rid of these ambulances. We don't want to cut ourselves short. You're only talking $26,000. I know it's, we're trying to save a little money here and a little money there, but I don't think taking the chance on saving that money, if we have 2 ambulances hit deer, which could happen, then we're going to be in quite a pickle because it does take quite a bit of time to replace these ambulances. So the fact that we have, we have some on reserve right now, I don't like the idea of cutting that. I don't know where we could come up with the difference, but I don't like the idea of cutting that.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, we need some sort of recommendation. Councillor Fritsch.
Thank you. I wasn't sure whose hands are up there. Yeah, so I'd make a motion that we from these proposed, I guess, reductions, that we retain the Economic Development Activation Fund and the surplus ambulance and don't remove those from the budget for the proposed budget.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Davison. Any further questions or discussion? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and through you, and just to be the devil's advocate here. the IT staffing enhancement, if we put that over to July 1st, are we able to limp our way and put that over to maybe the 2024 budget? There may be some substantial savings there if we put that over for another 6 months. Have we got the ability to do that, or is it something that we need to address reasonably quickly?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Brenda.
I think that I have abused the good nature of my IT staff for a very long time through COVID. We are incredibly thin. When you think about it, we have 3 people. So we have Jason as the manager, actually sometimes functioning as the frontline IT person because we just need the bodies to do so. And because of COVID, we're doing so much more virtual stuff, even with our council chambers, with the courts and POA, like their virtual components has now fallen on IT. So now that COVID is over, the increased responsibilities that they've experienced, they still carry forward and they're actually getting greater. And I'm concerned about risk because if you can imagine, our nursing homes run on our computer systems and our ambulances and all of the services and everything we do depend on our IT staff. If we have 3 guys, I'm worried if one of them was sick. I see it as a liability issue, and I see it as a liability from cybersecurity as well. I mean, absolutely, if you guys decide that that's what you'd like us to do, we absolutely will do that. But I see it as a workload issue, but I also see it as a liability issue for us if something goes wrong and we don't have the staff IT depth to address it. But we will do whatever you choose.
No, thank you. And as I go through the list, I'm just trying, if I may follow up, Warden Hogg. As I go through the list, I'm trying to pick or select the things that are of the least liable to us as a corporation, as a community. I have to agree with, I'm sketchy with respect to the ambulance situation. Once it's gone, it's gone. And if something untoward happens, we're in a real pickle. I mean, the tree issue, I think is something that can very easily be moved from one to the other. I'm hoping anyways. And then we get into of course, the nurse practitioner program, which is, again, I think it's pretty important to the community. So I'm just looking to see where, if and any things we can cut to trim. And I'm trying to pick the things that are the least intrusive to us as a corporation. So, but I appreciate your thoughts and your views, Ms. Orchard, with respect to the IT stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I believe we've got a motion on the floor. So, Councillor Hagedorn.
Thank you. I was just going to ask if, before I comment, if I could just have the motion reread again so that I make sure I caught it all.
Yes.
So the motion was to approve the budget increases without the economic development activation fund and without the selling the surplus ambulance. So the
Yes.
remainder of those decreases would be taken.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yes, that's the way I understood it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I missed some of it and I want to make sure I understood it fully before I spoke to it.
Yep.
I'm through you, Warden. I know last meeting I threw a number out that raised eyebrows. In reality, when we're looking at this and we're looking at the whole picture, doing any better than that, I don't believe we can. So I'm in support of the motion the way it stands. And even the nurse practitioner, I hate to see us share any more than we absolutely have to, just because I know that this, healthcare is in such a dire strait as it is, that if we can get good staff in healthcare, we definitely need to be. We have lots of work for them, but this might help get us through to next year where we can take it on full time.
Councillor Davison.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo those words on the nurse practitioner. I know that's probably actually the hardest one to deal with there, but as Mrs. Malcolm just said, they're getting that it's new to them this year. And if we can get 3 or 4 days, that's a huge help for this year. And maybe next year we can go all the way. That's as much as I hate to see a day or 2 cut, I think it's reasonable because it's still an increase in service.
Any other comments or questions before I call the question? We've got a motion on the floor to approve the revised budget with the exception of the Economic Development Activation Fund and the sale of the ambulance. Ready for the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Strategic planning. Brenda.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So as you know, we're planning to do our strategic planning, action planning in May. So we had originally thought, we wanted to make sure that we help our ratepayers understand what services the county actually provides, because sometimes we do think that they don't know we're here, and the difference between the local level and our level. So we had originally thought we should do maybe an in-person open house kind of session in each of the 4 lower tiers to explain the services and talk about some of the more meatier issues that you'll be weighing on when you do strategic planning, like super library and affordable housing, some of those big ones. But then we thought, oftentimes people don't show up to open houses and we might be in a room with 2 people and maybe that's not the best way to go. And since Zoom is so popular and working well for us, if we did a virtual session and then invited comments where people and an email address where people could email in their comments and we could provide them to council so you could get feedback, that we would do one virtual session. But we're certainly still open to doing the in-person in each township. I had a chance to chat with our warden and our deputy warden to say, what are you thinking? They suggested, well, there's 4 lower tiers and we should ask all of you. So, and rightly so. And because I know your townships are different. So still the premise is the same. We want the public to understand the different services we provide, the different topics that you're going to be discussing when we do strategic planning. And of course, the strategic planning session will be videoed and put on Zoom. But it was either way, we still get the end goal. So I'm open to your thoughts on whether you want to do in person in each township or a Zoom session.
Does anyone have any thoughts or comments? Councillor Richardson. You're muted.
Sorry about that, Mr. Warden. And I guess the question is for Brenda, is there any opportunity to maybe do a hybrid type of thing? I mean, I'm supportive of the fact that the Zoom can reach out to a lot of people. Unfortunately, we miss people without having the opportunity of having an in-person meeting. And I know it may not be very many, but I think we have to try and accommodate as many people as we can. And I can appreciate the fact that we may end up with a meeting hall with 2 people in it, but it may be 2 people that just don't have the ability to Zoom. So I don't know if a hybrid type of thing is available or at least for our community. That's my thoughts on it anyways. Thank you.
We could certainly do the session in person in our council chambers, invite the public, of course, to attend, but also have it videoed and put it out like we're doing this council meeting today. So we could certainly do an in-person. Absolutely. If you choose to do one versus one in each of the 4 townships, that's a fine option.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor French.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. It's a bit of a comment. I think it can't, and I don't disagree with Councillor Richardson because you may get a person or 2 that that have a lot to say and some good things to say and some great input. But certainly in our township, and we're having some strategic planning discussions right now, and some of the issues that people bring up typically, and you'll see that the lower tier are upper tier responsibilities, and they either know the difference or can distinguish between it, or they don't, and that really doesn't matter. So the point, I guess, what I'm getting at is, certainly in our municipality, the discussions we're having now and input from members of council, staff, and the community certainly arm the members of council in our municipality with being able to provide input to the upper tier strategic discussions from the input we were already receiving from our lower tier. So my view is I would support the Zoom, because I think, and I'm just thinking of our location and where we are, and if someone hasn't, for the most part, if people want to participate, they're finding a way to do that. So anyway, just my 2 cents. I like the Zoom session, and one of them.
Councillor Wise, you had a comment.
Yeah, I would basically echo what Tony was saying. I think it was a bit ambitious to maybe have four different sessions. And on the other hand, as Terry was saying, it may be more democratically responsible to at least have the option of people attending in person. So I guess what I'm asking Brenda is just if we went with some kind of hybrid presentation, what would that actually look like? Would we do that from county council chambers, but have an opportunity at each lower tier for the public to attend? And I guess I just need sort of a physical description of what you might envision with some kind of hybrid presentation.
Hybrid, my interpretation of Councillor Richardson's idea would be that we would hold it in our council chambers, invite the public. But when I say that, I'm mindful that chances are more people from Napanee town would show up than Addington Highlands, for instance. So maybe there's a middle ground here, and we do one north and one, I'll say north of 401 and one south of the 401. So then there's not 4, there's 2. I don't know. I would worry that, if we do one open to the public in one location and you're getting in-person feedback, it might be skewed to that community versus, for example, if you're, someone in Tamworth might not drive to Napanee to attend the in-person session. Just trying to balance the fact that you have 4 townships and some of them are more remote than others.
Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I do like the idea that we're going to Zoom it, that we do Zoom it from county council chambers. I think we can hit 2 birds with 1 stone by doing that. That will serve, at least for the residents of the Napanee area, will serve as an opportunity to be in person if they can, which means that we don't have to have a Zoom +4 meetings. If best would be a Zoom +3, but I like the idea of Brenda, if there's an opportunity or there's interest in the other communities, that we can provide some sort of in person meeting for them. But I do like the idea of Zooming it from our county council chambers, because we can hit 2 birds with 1 stone, sort of say, I guess.
Councillor Calvert.
So I hate Zoom meetings. I hate anything with computers, don't I, John? I'm just wondering if we can still do it in one session, but maybe we can have all of our council chambers zoomed in for that one session. So Addington Highlands would be in their council chambers. Napanee could be in the Lennox and the county chambers here. So you're still doing one meeting, but it gives your community an opportunity to go to their local meeting hall or town hall versus doing 4 separates. Is that something we could even do, or?
I love that idea. I love the fact that you built on all the other ideas to make a new idea. I love that idea.
Well, like I'm just sitting there. I mean, everybody wants to cut it down to one meeting. I get that. We don't want to exclude any of our community members out of an opportunity to sit in. So if we were all in our respective chambers, it would be open to, everybody and Zoom it together. We're still getting it done in one meeting, but yet we're still kind of doing in person. I don't know. Just one of those crazy thoughts I just come up with.
I think that's
I'm
great.
sorry, that was
Thank you,
through
Warden
you,
Wise.
Warden.
Yes, thank you. That was exactly what I was thinking, Brian. You took the words
I
right.
seen that.
You took the words right out of my head, and that's great. Full credit. That to me is the great compromise solution here. Sure, it's nice to be in person, but second best is you can still have input. We could still have an open session in each of those individual council chambers other than the county council chamber. I don't think it's depriving anyone of an opportunity to have input, and it from a staff time perspective, it's all done in one day. So I think Brian's hit the nail on the head there, and I'll await further discussion, but I'll move a motion that we do that and see how things play out.
Is there a seconder for John's motion? Councillor Townend. I guess we need to ask Jason if he can.
Yeah, it might be good.
Can you do it?
We'll make that work. We'll find a way to make that work.
Okay, good. Any other questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
Thank you.
Okay, Affordable Housing Partnership. We've got a staff report concerning the proposal from Wildscape.
Through you, Mr. Warden, the Wildscape company did a presentation to Prince Edward Lennox Nannington Social Services Committee on February 9th. As a result of that presentation, Apellis Committee supports the consideration of the proposal provided by Cabinscape, and further that Apellis Committee encourages both Lennox and Addington and Prince Edward County Councils to consider the partnership opportunity either individually or collaboratively through Prince Edward Lennox and Addington Social Services. So this company, and you may have seen the video, this company is working to build small homes, so not tiny homes, small homes. And they're very centered on, they're a sustainable building company. They're trying to use the lowest carbon footprints possible. They're also trying to do this solution so that it's scalable. It can be small, it can be larger, and those kinds of things. So they're looking for a property partner to develop a new row housing solution. In our case, we'd be looking at affordable or transitional housing, or even rent geared to income housing. At this point, we haven't made it. There's been no decisions at all as to what this could look like in the end, but it would be row housing, and they are looking for a property partner. So we are asking County Council's support to pursue a partnership with Prince Edward County and Wildscape to potentially develop affordable housing solutions in the service area. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Does anyone have questions of Lynn? Councillor Fritsch.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. And yes, being part of Apellis, I had the privilege to listen in on that presentation. I think a question I have here is, with regard to properties, if this project went ahead, because I know they were talking about possibility in both Prince Edward and, County and in LNA County, but with respect to an R County, is there are there properties already known, or are there opportunities for all lower tiers to be involved? I guess from the sense that if you are looking for, if it went ahead and we're looking for potential properties in LNA County, that there would be some consultation with all lower tier municipalities on possible properties.
So at this point, we haven't really developed kind of a set, this is what we're going to do. We are currently looking at properties that are owned by LNA County. The company is really looking for kind of odd size, odd shaped properties that their solution could work. So if we have a property that's an odd shape that you really couldn't use it for anything else, but they may be able to use it for these smaller homes. And it now becomes unusable property to a usable property for a good purpose of being affordable housing. So we're currently going through that process right now to determine if there's any properties owned by Lennox and Addington County that could fit that bill. If not, we would then probably come to our lower tiers, similar like we did with our previous affordable housing project.
Okay, thank you, Lynn.
Councillor Davidson, you had a question?
Yes, I did, Lynn, or through you, your worship. I didn't see in the presentation or in the video if there was any term fixed to this machine. Is there a term that we're tied into? And the only reason I'm asking that question is there may be other alternatives coming down the road for affordable housing. So I'm just wondering about that.
Thanks for the question through you, Mr. Warden. There really isn't a term. So what they're looking for right now is the property partner. So before that ever happens, they would take a look at the properties, see what solutions that they were able to offer. That we would then the developer would then be looking at applying for CMHC funding. At the end of this project, the property partner would be the owner of the property and the homes that are sitting on them to add to our portfolio. So there's no length of term or anything at all like that, and it would not preclude us from applying for other funding sources as they become available down the road.
Good, thank you.
Any other, Councillor David Richardson?
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and through you. When I watched the YouTube video this afternoon, I guess I did have some questions with respect to some of the infrastructure that was involved with these type of homes, and the part that really twigged was the consideration or the thoughts of having shared wells with respect to these small homes. I guess my concerns are with that, with respect to if they're on services, it's one thing, but if they're in the country on aquifers that may or may not be able to support their sharing wells and maybe possibly even shared septic systems, I think there could be some concerns there, but I know that's probably not the topic that we need to talk about tonight, especially if those folks aren't here to answer those questions for me.
I can't speak directly to those kinds of concerns. However, I do know that we are building in Tamworth, we're building 2 4-unit buildings, and they are on well and septic as well. So whatever solutions are brought forward, if it's in a rural setting, we would ensure that, of course, there is sufficient water, septic, all of those kinds of things. So he was talking about shared services in that video, where that would be more kind of the bunkie house type of setting, where they have a room with a bed and a pillow, and then they would use a shared washroom or shared kitchen facility separate from that. And that's not what we would be looking at as part of this partnership at all. It would be a full unit with bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, and each unit would be on their own. So I hope that helps.
Any other questions or comments? We've got a staff report here, and I believe there's a recommendation to encourage consideration. Deputy Warden Wise.
Yes, thank you, Henry. I would make the recommendation that council approve Pellis to pursue a partnership with Prince Edward and Wildscape to develop affordable housing.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Counselor Davison,
I will second that motion.
any further questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Queen Elizabeth School.
Thank you,
Ms.
Mr.
Sheniak.
Warden. Thank you. At the February 9th Palace Committee report, Palace Committee, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm lost here. Committee approved Palace to work with Prince Edward County to submit a formal offers to purchase the Queen Elizabeth School. We received notification that we were the successful proponent on that, as Palace was number 4 on the list of people that were, or organizations that were able to purchase that property. Palace Committee is also supporting the allocation of up to $800,000 as a conditional financial contribution toward the initial purchase of Queen Elizabeth School, which would be repaid by Prince Edward County from future funding or financing from the Housing Reserve Fund. And they're also recommending to allocate the money to come from our capital reserve. So there would be no funding impact in terms of our operating budget. And by the end of 2024, the $800,000 would be repaid by Prince Edward County to go back into the Housing Reserve Fund. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Does anyone have questions of this project? If not, I need a motion to receive the report and approve the recommendation. Councillor Fritsch, Councillor Hagedorn, any questions or comments? Ready for the vote? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, microsurface treating, Mr. Wager.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you, the report is asking council direction to extend an agreement with Miller Paving for our microsurfacing work for 2023. Originally, they were looking for 6.9%, which is noted in the TAC committee minutes in the next report. But that's the Canadian CPI. Where we typically use the Ontario or the CPI increase, and considering all the other increases we're seeing in the construction industry, 0.9% is 0.9%. So they did agree to use the Ontario one and revise it to a 6% increase, which does seem fair, and all TAC members agreed that it was fair, considering that other municipalities are preparing for the same or even higher increases for their microsurfacing projects. I'd be happy to answer any questions should council have any.
Does anyone have questions of Mr. Wager? If not, we've got a report and a recommendation. Need a motion. Councillor Richardson, Councillor Hagedorn, any further questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, advisory committee recommendations, technical advisory committee. Once again, Mr. Wager.
Through you, I don't have anything to add or highlight, but I'd be happy to answer any questions should council have any.
Does anyone have any questions on the technical advisory committee? If not, I guess I need a motion to receive that report. Councillor Wise, seconded by Councillor Fritsch. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, somehow I'm having trouble with my agenda here. Any committee reports by members of council? None noted. Resolutions. First, the Cannabis Act. Good. Resolution from the County of Huron. Councillor Wise, Deputy Warden Wise.
Yes, thank you, Warden. I would move we receive and adopt this. It summarizes, I think, concerns that all of our municipalities have quite well. So I would support it.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Counselor Davison. Any questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. Other business, statements by members. Notice of motion. Counselor Hagedorn. You're muted.
Okay, thank you, there I am. Yes, I'd make a notice of motion to make a motion to request a staff report on implementing development charges similar to other county level jurisdictions.
Okay. Is that, where's Tracy? Is that how it needs to be done, Tracy?
Certainly, that's fine. That'll appear on an upcoming agenda then.
Okay, thank you. Any other notice of motions? Matters of urgency. Okay, we got a bylaw concerning council remuneration. To amend bylaw 3418/18 as amended. Provide for the remuneration of members of council and the payment of expenses for members of council, boards and committees of the county of Lennox and Addington. I need 3 readings. Councillor Fritsch, Councillor Hagedorn. Ready for the vote. All in favor? That's carried. Confirmation of proceedings. Confirm the proceedings. Need 3 readings. Deputy Warden Wise, Councillor Townsend. Any comments? Ready for the vote. All in favor? That's carried. Now we need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Hagedorn, Deputy Warden Wise. All in favor? That's carried and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Hope we don't have to worry about the weather. Everybody's already safe at home.
Yep.